Good to be back.
Your event is starting. And we are live. Welcome to Apollo Challenge Live, episode 12. I am Will Coffin, as well here with, I'm Will, we're good. I'm Will Coffin, as well here with Kyle Bracey and Brett Bates.
Good morning.
Morning.
We are here to talk about fats today.
Yummy.
Yeah, delicious. I can't get enough of them. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for subscribing. If you're watching this live, you're probably subscribed, and that's fantastic. If not, then you should subscribe, and I will remind you again at the end. But thanks for being with us. How's it going, guys?
It's going.
We got Brett back from Germany, so he took a trip overseas. Did you enjoy yourself?
It was great. We actually spent 6 days in Germany, then we went to Scotland.
Okay.
So it was an amazing trip, and I'd highly recommend Hamburg, Germany, or Edinburgh, Scotland to anybody. It was great. Scotland looked like a big Harry Potter book. It really did.
Really?
Yeah, it's an amazing city. There's literally a castle in the middle of it, so you
very cool.
you can't go wrong with it. Check it out.
Who had better food?
Germany.
Yeah.
Yeah, Scotland isn't really known for their food. Good fish and chips, but nothing crazy beyond that. Germany's meat is, the meat I had was unbelievable.
Uh-huh.
So I did not.
Did you consume some fat?
Yes, there was fat in there. And I made sure to, not necessarily the best thing, I suppose, but put butter on everything that I possibly could.
Good. Good.
Even the pretzels, so I
if you're
kind of
gonna
balance that out.
I mean, if you're gonna do it, you may as well blunt your glycemic load by layering on the fats on top of your carbs.
Yeah, it was.
That's a pro tip right there.
Yeah.
If you're desperate and you are in a foreign country, and you are going to be consuming carbohydrates in the form of bread products, load it up with oil and fats.
Yeah. Well, I got a question for both of you. I think, aren't we told that fat is bad?
Yeah, I would say that's how we were raised. I think we were raised by the media, and so that was what we learned. I think if you look, give up my age here a little bit. I was born in 1979, and so I was right at the cusp of all that healthy choice marketing, right? So you guys are a bit younger, but I can still remember vividly the grocery store.
That's TV dinners, right? Healthy choice stuff.
Yeah, Healthy Choice was a marketing concept where they took any popular food and they branded it Healthy Choice, and they stripped the fat of it, and then replaced it with the artificial sugar, right? And so on every box was 0 or 1 gram of fat,
heart healthy, and
so
all that
stuff. And so that was where everybody, that was where we were driven to, right? So I can still remember trying to go through the grocery store because I had health in mind even as a teenager, and so especially in wrestling, right? Because you're obviously always thinking about controlling your weight, and then so these were the products that were marketed to me, and that was what I was trusting at the time. So I think originally, it was regarded as a bad. I'm getting some feedback there.
Yeah, you're good. Just turn it off, sorry.
It was originally regarded as bad because of its caloric content. So if I was to give you a gram of protein and a gram of carbohydrate, they're going to equal 4 calories. However, if I'm going to give you a gram of fat, it's going to have 9 calories. And so the idea was that more fat is going to actually create a caloric burden on you. And so the problem is there are a lot of shades of gray there, and the big one is that you can't factor in very specifically how much energy that individual uses to actually break down and burn that fat, and then what other effects are caused by consumption of either the carbohydrate or the protein, with the spike of insulin and so forth. So it's just really not that simple, and they tried to simplify it in that manner because it was the easiest to understand, and unfortunately it just was real ineffective.
So in general, it was a marketing scheme or concept that
absolutely
that they put out.
Yeah, it was marketing. It was well
marketing
marketed.
and business too, right?
Yeah.
Sure.
So
sure.
if you think about just the revolution of the food industry and how everything's been engineered to cost less, just like any product, right? You want to reduce your overhead, increase your margins, and so you're going to select foods that don't cost as much, and you're going to engineer them so they last longer, okay? Because that increases your opportunity to make a sale as opposed to a fresher food. That's what you're going to end up with, and so that's why you can get into all these little mini arguments on all these little divisions, but if you step back and look at it from a whole, you can really understand that that's just not good for me. You know? So
I mean, it was kind of the whole tipping point of the industrial food movement that got us into where we are as far as what we think about fats. Was this kind of, okay, let's try and engineer these low-fat foods, and so these companies had to go and develop ways to make food that didn't include fats or traditional fats, which were, because fat as for thousands and thousands and thousands of years has been part of food, and it's what holds certain foods together. It's what helps keep certain things stable for longer. Fat is an essential part of pretty much every type of cooking. And so when kind of we had to, okay, how are we going to create low-fat foods? Like, oh my gosh, we're taking out a giant component. So they went and they engineered all of these alternatives that ended up being way worse for us in the long run. On top of that, and so that's where you get into some of these trans fats, and we could talk about that a little more later. But some of the negative outcomes of that. But that's the thing, is like, we're finally coming back to this. Okay, let's go back. Let's reassess food and realize that fats are fantastic, and Apollo Challenge is all about using fat as your fuel source, as your main fuel source, over carbohydrates, because carbohydrates spike your insulin. They will then eventually cause fat storage and weight gain and all this that cascade. Whereas if we're on a low enough carb diet, we're in ketosis, we're burning our fat. We've got, as Kyle mentioned, we've got a much more efficient source of fuel, so it's got a lot more power per gram than other sources of fuel. And then we've got the benefit of ketosis and the cognitive effects of ketosis. So we've got clearer thinking, we've got more efficient brain metabolism by using ketones over glucose. So there's a lot of reasons to come back to fats.
So I'll parlay the question into Brett. So when you think of carbohydrate, all right, and you think of Skittles or candy or sugar, whatever, you think of whatever your sweet spot is, you know? And so what are you thinking as far as the immediate effects afterwards? What do you feel?
Tired, lethargic.
Immediately afterwards?
No, not immediately.
Yeah.
But maybe an hour or so afterwards, you're starting to crash and have that lull in your afternoon or whatever the case may be, whenever you're having it. But yeah, it's maybe you get that initial rush.
Yeah.
But eventually you're falling.
Yeah,
off.
you get giddy for a bit, right? Yeah. And you get excited, right? Which is going to get you to a peak, but then there's obviously a valley to follow. So that's the interesting thing about fat, is that you're going to have a more stable energy source over time. And if you think about the scope of your day and how much you're really required to have fast-acting available fuel source, it's not often in your day. What you need is that stable source. So if you think about energy and as far as rate, this is the speed of which it's delivered, and then the capacity. Your carbohydrate is actually going to be used at a faster rate, okay? Mm-hmm. There's no debating that. But the fat is going to work at a much greater capacity. It's going to be, you're going to have an opportunity to use it much longer. It'd be like going on a long trip with a small gas tank versus a very big gas tank, you know, without any available gas stations to stop at. And so you'd obviously select the longer or the bigger fuel tank, and you'd want a more efficient engine, and an efficient engine comes in being able to use that really well. And that's where the misinformation it really sets in, because with the Apollo Challenge, our whole premise is getting individuals keto adapted, and in doing that, they become each day much more efficient at using that fuel, as you've noticed and experienced, and as Will and I have noticed and experienced. The further you go into it, the much better you are because of it.
Yeah. Well, and it's not to dive down this rabbit hole too deep, but it's dangerous, right? And it's dangerous to not be able to utilize fat as an energy source as far as, the diets that Americans are eating on a regular basis, whether it be, whatever it may be in the afternoon, kind of that escape, like you had mentioned, Skittles or a donut or a bagel or something like that. Because most
things that are light, you think that they're
Right.
light, but they're really, really costly.
Right,
So,
right. Because you see all those yogurts out there who are advertised as zero fat, and it's probably loaded with what on the back end, sugar.
Well, they just strip out all the fat, and so all you're left with is the lactose and,
Right.
and the protein. But
Right.
well, and the fat tastes good, right?
Right.
Fat tastes good. So if you take out the fat, guess what it has to be replaced with? It has to be replaced with something that makes it taste better, which
Right.
is often sugar. If it's not sugar, it's a sugar substitute.
Right.
Okay. So, I mean, it's just a matter of you're in the business of selling a food product. Most people don't buy food products that don't taste good.
Right.
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 Yeah.
You got to sweeten it up somehow. So we're diving into this, the fat aspect of the Apollo Challenge, and what are the fats that you should be consuming, but not all fats are created equal. So what would be considered a good fat for you?
So, I mean, there are the good fats are the ones that we've talked about at nauseum
Sure.
in the Apollo Challenge stuff. So we're talking about, you've got both plant-derived and you've got animal-derived sources of this, but these are going to be your unsaturated, polyunsaturated, and even saturated fats from the right sources. And these can all be good sources of dietary fat. So we've got our plant-derived fats are going to be our coconut. So that's going to be both of you are going to cook with the coconut oil, and then our MCT oil, which is coconut derived, and that's really just the really, really good fats from the coconut oil that we're using there. And avocados, whether it be from whole avocados or avocado oil, great sources of fats. Olive oil in the same way. Olive oil is call it a superfood, but it really is a superfood, and it has not been overused in our diet over the years. It's a fantastic source of fats, and spikes your ketones in a similar way to MCT oil. So that both are going to really drive up your ability to produce energy there. Nuts are another great source of plant-derived fats, and they're going to be high in your omega-3s and 6s, and so those are essential fatty acids that we need, that our body can't create itself, but we need to consume through our diet. And most Americans don't consume enough omega-3 in their diet. So especially because of the sources we get, it's heavily laden towards the omega-6s, because a lot of that comes from grains and from other vegetable sources, seed derived oils and whatnot, and those are higher in the 6s, and so we really want a kind of a balance of omega-3s and 6s, and so we want to focus more on the 3s, and I'll talk about that with some of the animal fats. But another great source of plant derived fats is macadamia nut oil. That's another great thing to put on your salads or cook with.
Outstanding taste.
Yeah.
Macadamia
Yeah.
nut
Do
oil.
you have it?
Yeah, it's delicious.
Yeah, you should start using it. It also really
Should
does
come
really
over.
does really well with high heat too. So
Okay.
or higher heat. No, I shouldn't say the
Yeah.
highest. That's a
Disclaimer: you really
big-
you shouldn't use high heat with any oil,
big
but
consideration.
yeah.
So,
What would be considered high heat? Like you're just talking about conventional
well,
oven,
you're
or-
talking anything up when you're talking about 325 and above, then you better be checking your smoke points on all of your
okay.
oils. And then when you're actually cooking and preparing them, you can think about, all right, well, is my thermometer real accurate here too? And then take a look at it yourself and see what's actually happening to the oil, because if it is becoming burning or
right. I
becoming
mean, if you
toxic,
see it smoking, that's a sign that you've surpassed its smoke point, which
Right.
means that it's breaking down, and you're going to have some negative. It's
Okay.
gone bad. in that
regardless of what the label says,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Then that's where you have to start trusting yourself and your
Yep.
ability to assess it. So.
Yep.
sense. Yeah. And if you do hit that point, if you get to the point where you've smoked a whole pan of oil, turn it off and start over.
Yeah.
Don't try and salvage that batch of oil. Just,
One, it'll taste-
let it cool down. It'll taste nasty.
terrible, ruin your food, and then secondly, it's terrible for you. So
Is
Yeah.
it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's maybe it takes a little more time. It's like you'll find that sweet spot, but paying attention to not overheating your oil is actually really
I
important.
need to make a conscious effort to put the heat down on my oven when I'm making food, because we're it's all about convenience, right? So you just want to
you're
turn
working
the,
on time.
yeah.
But it tastes better. Low and slow, man. Low and slow
Yeah.
tastes better every
Yeah.
time.
Yep.
Every time. That's our plant-derived fats. Those are the big ones. There's tons of other ones. And we'll talk about some of the. Those are the really the good plant-based fats that we endorse. And there are a lot of other plant-derived fats, but some of them will pop up in the kind of things to avoid section we can talk about later. Then when it comes to animal fats, another great source is salmon. Salmon's kind of the gold standard as far as animal fats go.
Yep.
It's super high in your omega-3s, your EPA and DHA, so that's a great way to kind of help balance out the deficiency of omega-3 in your diet. Wild caught salmon, correct. Yeah. Yeah, we don't want the fat profile from the grain that farmed salmon eat to taint our salmon. So we want wild caught salmon. And then your grass-fed beef. So that's going to have grass-fed has a higher balance, higher amount of omega-3 in it than grain-fed does. Grain-fed's got a more omega-6. So grass-fed's a much better balance of omega-3s and 6s, as well as just a higher quality source of fat in general. A lot of this comes down to the quality of the animal and the quality of the food it ate, because a lot of what it eats and the toxins that it eats are stored in its fat. So the higher quality animal you derive your fat from, the higher quality fat you're going to end up with in this case. And so wild game's another great source of those high quality animal based fats, because it's ideally, if it's not on if it's not stocked, it's being fed a natural diet. And then, obviously grass-fed beef, grass-fed cows, grass-fed butter. So grass-fed butter is another great source of omega-3s, omega-6s, CLA. It's got a really good fat profile overall, and so those are all great things to help offset or help to make sure you hit your fat quota for the day. And that's the thing. You got to make sure you hit your fat numbers for the day. And when you do, you're not going to be hungry. You're not going to feel like you have to supplant it with other things. So, keeping the carbohydrates down, keeping the high quality fats up from a variety of sources, because all of these different types of fats have different profiles. They're going to provide different nutrients to the body. But they're all, if we're going to generalize it between kind of your glucose, insulin, and your fatty acid, ketone fuel sources, we want to use the ketone fuel sources because they're far more efficient at using oxygen, and therefore more efficient at creating energy in your body. So that's where we want to get most of our fuel. And one of the things is we, as a species, have evolved to use fat as fuel. We've got days of fuel stored in our bodies. Yep. Even at optimal body composition numbers in the low teens, you've got days and days of fuel left for your body to run on. So as long as you get enough water, people have fasted for months, and there's enough fuel there for them to run. So that's been a big thing for me to think of. Okay, I have the fuel necessary to survive in my body. The triggers that are happening in my brain saying that I'm going to die if I don't have enough food right now, that's completely conditioned, and that's usually a result of kind of that insulin spike and crash, and the signals that happen say, oh my gosh, we need more of that stuff,
right? Because
our bodies become dependent upon using glucose. So when I'm completely fat adapted, my body doesn't have that issue. I'm not craving fuel because I have it. I've got everything I need. So and we're just by adding those high quality fats back in, we're just helping to supplant and replenish those sources.
Right.
So that's my fat tirade.
Anything you want to add there, Kyle?
Yeah, no, I would ask you, going through the challenge now, would you trust your instincts of when you feel good and when you don't feel good, and then be able to assess the reasons why?
As far as how I'm feeling because of the food intake?
Exactly.
Yes, I would trust my instincts.
Yeah,
now.
You've gotten to a level right now where you feel really good, right? And
yep.
So that's where we're really trying to empower the users, because then they can make really consistently good decisions for themselves, because the default is to defer. All right, the default is to defer, and boy, if you jump into defer, and then you're going to get into a whole mix of conflicting information, which is just befuddling, right? It's just like, who do I trust? All right, and where do I go? Because this guy's an expert, that guy's an expert, and they're saying entirely two different things, right? And we have to understand that's a little mix. It's almost, in that realm of politics where you never know where the money's coming from, because that's what's driving the information. So that's why we're so adamant. Once you get on the challenge and really experience that heightened effect of mental clarity and that fat loss, that initial body fat loss, you really start to create your own path, and then you can really make accurate decisions for yourself. And I think you're experiencing that, and we've had many, many others, and that's probably the most gratifying thing for us, is to get people to that stage where, they're trusting their instincts, they're able to go grocery shop and make a decision, see how they feel, adversely or favorably, and then go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, having the knowledge and building a knowledge base from going on the Apollo Challenge, it's almost like you're not going to know until you try it.
Right.
And you're not going to know that fasting works for you, or being in a keto adapted state is going to work for you until you try it.
Right.
And I've always been of the opinion that you should. Everyone's different, and people respond differently to different workouts, different forms of diets, whatever the case may be. Yeah. And this is one that I'll never stray from, because I know that it works for me.
Right.
And I can, at a moment's notice, I can control, obviously the food I put in my body, but how good I feel because of the food I put in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And there's really there's no better reward having that type of information in your back pocket. It's like I know how to feel better in a day.
And you don't kid yourself too. I mean, you were out in Germany enjoying that pretzel, thinking to yourself that, hey, this is great for me. This is a light snack, right?
Guess what I can come back to right here, anytime I want. So and it's great. Yeah, but you're right. I mean, you reward yourself from time to time, and go have froyo and donuts from time to time.
So.
I don't consider that a reward. I consider that that's more of that's I do, in my mind, I give myself we don't advocate a cheat meal in a sense.
No.
But every month or so, I will allow myself to cheat. So rather than calling it a reward, I say I'm going to cheat on this very mindfully and intentionally, and then go back to the way I should be eating.
It's a mindful, intentional cheat.
Yeah, you'll enjoy it more too, right? You'll enjoy it more because you're actually consciously making the decision, right?
Yes.
So the carbs will find you. So I can't remember the time in my life when I wasn't thinking about healthy foods. I was driven towards this at a young age. And then I remember finishing up my college education, which was in exercise science, and then going to my first job and watching my boss. He was watching me over the course of the first couple of weeks eat lunch, and he noticed that everything I was bringing was on the healthy side. And he was in his upper 50s, and then he wanted to give me his lesson on nutrition. All right, and it was probably, out of all the lessons I've ever received, one of the more prominent ones, in my memory. And so he said, "Now, the fat I eat is to lubricate my joints. Okay, the salt I eat and I add to my diet is to preserve my body, and then the sugar in the form of Skittles and so forth is to provide my energy rush." And it was just a happy logistical place to live, as fantasy as that might have sounded. So
I mean, it's easy. That's an easy metaphor, to try and use to paint a picture for someone, but that's just pointedly not true.
Oh, and he knew it too, but it was under that premise of fat and happy, right?
What is he, a mummy? Yeah. I need salt to preserve my body.
One more thing I want to touch on that Will brought up with the animal fats and the wild game and so forth, and even the seafood and fish, is the importance with your meats is to add a little diversity to your diet and be creative. And we've spoken on in the past is that the original menu in the Apollo Challenge for that 20 days is rather limited and concise. That being said, once you go off and you've really honed your cooking skills, encourage you to seek out other meats that are favorable, because that's one going to add to your creativity. And then two, it's also going to eliminate any staples in your diet and repetition of the same foods, okay, which could be, when we're talking about animals, could be bringing in the same toxins, okay? And so it's a good way to mix it up.
Yeah, for sure. I did want to ask you, though, Kyle, obviously you studied exercise science in college and nutrition and whatnot. Was this was a keto-adapted state and type of lifestyle, was that taught? Or was that kind of brushed on as far as?
No, so that would have been that would have been late 90s, and it would have been the exact opposite. So like we talked about regarding energy, rate, and capacity, and so they're inversely related, right? So if you have a high rate, okay, you're going to have low capacity. Think carbohydrate, all right? If you're going to have a low rate of delivery, how fast it becomes available to you, where fat is on the other end of the spectrum, then you're going to have high capacity. Okay, now the problem is that's all scaled on intensity. So you can think about when we're talking about performance and exercise and real high intensities, that's where the carbohydrate can come into play. The problem is that all of the testing that has ever been done with that is on individuals who have never keto adapted, and so they've never effectively produced ketones for a fuel source, and they've never done it over time. And so all of the evidence that's surrounded around that is taking you or me and going really hard in an exercise bout for 1 to 2 days. Okay, and you would be given carbohydrate, and I would be restricted from it, and then we'd measure on performance on the 3rd and 4th day, right? And so, of course, I'm going to perform poorly because I have no ability to use fat as a very effective fuel source. And so
you're just getting into your keto adapted state at that point.
Their argument is legit in that scope, right? But when we take it out and put it in a different one, it's entirely changed. And I think when you really look out there and seek out information, there are individuals that are really highly high performers in long bouts of exercise, endurance activities and so forth, that are keto adapted, and they're actually performing better.
Well, we've got more and more studies coming out, every day about studying the effects of ketosis on endurance and performance, and I think that's mostly because it's kind of swung back this way, and we're finally getting the science community behind it. But there are more and more studies coming out showing the effectiveness of this. Sure. As far as a long-term solution.
And the higher you perform and the better you get at it, the more insulin sensitive you become, and in many cases you can consume a little bit more carbohydrate without a burden. But that's something that's got to be taken real seriously, because if it's not, then you're going to underperform. So that's a step above what we're talking about right now.
Right.
So
we went down a rabbit hole.
No, that's important stuff. It's important stuff. Should we get back to fats for a few moments? So one thing I wanted to clear up was kind of this idea that certain categories of fat are good or bad. And so unfortunately, it's not that easy. There are 2 categories that we can definitely rule out, and we'll get to that. But the main categories of fat are unsaturated, polyunsaturated, and saturated. And those are found in all of the good stuff we've talked about. And for a long time, saturated fat was vilified because it is higher in cholesterol than the other 2 fats. The science on that has flipped, and what we found is that there's no link between dietary intake of cholesterol and high blood cholesterol, which is linked to heart disease and other coronary issues. Dietary cholesterol is essential for cell function. Cholesterol is what your body uses to create its cell membranes and all of those structures. So it's really important that we consume that. So there isn't saturated fat by definition. The science has flipped on that, and the medical community, saturated fat is not bad. It's just matters where you get your saturated fat and making sure you're getting high quality saturated fats. And saturated fats are typically found more commonly in your meats, because they're the solid at room temperature fats, and just making sure that wherever you get your fat from, that it's a high quality source, that it's an organic vegetable, that it's a grass fed, pasture raised meat, wild caught. So it really, the source of your fats is far more important than the type of fat they contain. But there are a couple categories that we should definitely avoid, and it's all over the news. The trans fat.
Yep.
These are modified fats. These are industrial modified fats that your body just doesn't know how to handle properly, and have definitely are linked to obesity and other heart conditions because it accumulates in your body because your body doesn't know how to process it properly. So trans fats, you're going to see less and less of those in foods going forward because
illegal,
most places,
right?
they've banned them.
Yeah.
But there's a little trick because there is another type of industrial processed fat called a interesterified fat, which is another method used by kind of the industrial food system. It's another method used by the industrial food system to make unstable fats more stable. And so you'll see these in foods. They're usually using the lower quality fats. So that's why in general we want to avoid seed oils that are very common and labeled as vegetable oil. Your canola, your rapeseed, I should have printed out a list so I could run through them so they were top of mind. But your soybean,
Right.
a lot of those kind of more common oils, it's a process they'll go through to make them more shelf stable, and they'll add them to foods because they give you that kind of that fatty, satiating mouthfeel. But they don't go bad as fast, and they're still not proven as whether or not it's your body doesn't know how to handle it, so it's really not good for you. So one of the processes that you'll see on a label is called hydrogenation, and so they add extra hydrogen molecules to unstable fat, which is these unsaturated and polyunsaturated fats, to fill out the structure and to make it more shelf stable. And what's another thing where our body just doesn't know how to handle this, so we want to avoid hydrogenated oils. So a lot of times in a lot of foods you'll see like hydrogenated soybean oil or hydrogenated canola oil. You really want to avoid those fats. Those aren't nature's fats. That's not from the source. And so unfortunately a lot of salad dressings will use these because it's shelf stable and doesn't go bad as fast. So it's really those are the categories you want to avoid. So if you see soybean oil, you see canola oil, if you see hydrogenated vegetable oil, all those sorts of things on the labels, stay away from it. It's not a good quality source of fat.
Vegetable oil in general.
Vegetable oil is a mix is what they typically use to denote a mix of whatever vegetable based oils they put in that product. So, if you were baking and it called for vegetable oil, it could be a mix of canola and soybean and some of these other sources that are cheap to put together. So vegetable oil in general, just if it's called vegetable oil, it's, typically avoid that.
Sure.
It could be peanut oil, it could be all these other sources of oils that are commonly used for cooking, for baking, for frying. I don't know. We can get back to the healthy stuff, but that's the stuff to avoid. You get any additions to that? Questions?
No, just keep it real simple. I think it's eyes on the prize and focused on the ones that are really good for you.
Mm-hmm.
We touch on olive oil, we touch on the healthy animal fats, and especially like the omega-3s that you receive from the salmon, wild salmon, and then really preparing with the coconut oil, and we've touched on the butter as well. So we incorporate the MCT oil first part of your day, right? And we understand that that's really favorable for producing ketones, right? It goes directly to the liver and is quickly processed. That's why you feel that immediacy of it. That's why it happens so quickly. And then you look at coconut oil and then the benefits when you're cooking your food with that for your gut, right? So that there's lauric acid in coconut oil and has a lot of awesome mechanisms, that occur. The funny thing is that I had a client reach out to me with an article that was conflicting with what I was explaining, and so, which I'm always encouraged when individuals are researching and so forth. And then I read the article, and it was a highly accredited university's professor. Okay. And then I saw the date on it, and it was within a year or two, and it was essentially ignoring any of the newer information and reverting back to that your primary oil sources should be coming from soybean oil and canola oil still, right? And that was what was being said by someone with authority, all right? And so
back in the 80s or whatever, right? Like
same thing, right? And so I brought this up when I started talking, and it was just a matter of wonder where the money's coming from,
right?
You know what I mean? And
right.
so that's the thing, right? You gotta have your guard up, and so trust yourself, trust how you're feeling, and then think about that. I think there's a lot of great tells what your energy's like, what your regularity's like, and then how's your skin responding to it as well. So, and those things will happen rather quickly. So, I mean, to close it up, focus on what's going to go in your diet, and instead of what is being excluded from it, and then from there you can create a variety of exciting foods to eat on a regular basis, and then really hone in your cooking skills.
Yeah. Well, generally, it sounds like I think your safe bet is you stick to the grass-fed beef, the wild-caught salmons and fish out there. I mean, obviously, hopefully, people are doing some research and trying to understand what a good fat and bad fat is. But as far as being safe goes, you just careful in selection of your food, and more often than not, you're going to be consuming the better fats for you.
Sure.
As opposed to
absolutely. With your coconut, avocado, olive oil, your nuts, your macadamia nut oil, just gonna reiterate them so they stick in your head as you listen to this.
Yeah.
Walking through the grocery store, but that's all the good stuff. I mean, the biggest, not to jump ahead of you here, Brett, but the most common reason that people don't attain or stay in ketosis is that they eat too many carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And not enough fat. So the easiest way to combat that is to eat more good fats. And these are all the good fats. Two kind of hacks, tricks that I want to share here. If you need an extra boost of energy and you're really feeling like you're deep into ketosis and you want to get further into ketosis, MCT oil. Take a tablespoon or 2 tablespoons of MCT oil. You can prepare, add another, make up another Smart Coffee, or you can just.
It's better than any product that we've had out there. MCT oil versus any of the exogenous ketones is the best response, at least for me. I think you share in that sentiment, and then it's just a matter of being able to tolerate the oil form.
Yeah, you'll find a threshold where you may have a bowel evacuating effect if you go past that. But 1 or 2 tablespoons usually is fine, and you will get a spike in your ketone level from that. And then the other one that has a positive effect on ketones is olive oil, so high quality olive oil. So if you're having your power salad, load that thing up with olive oil, and you can even take a shot of olive oil in a similar fashion to MCT oil.
That's your suggestion with the MCT oil. Take a shot of it.
You can.
Well,
you can.
What we're saying
like,
is that's the most readily a single step, right?
Okay.
I don't think they taste bad. It's gonna be neutral or maybe a hint of coconut, maybe, or that nutty aroma, but that's all you're gonna get from it. So
I've done it. It tastes great.
Yeah. So the one other thing that Will had touched on regarding cholesterol that is also advantageous is it's a precursor for testosterone production. And so for men, obviously, that's very important. And so it's another reason not to vilify it and to ensure that you do have sufficient amounts of cholesterol in your diet. That can be in the form of, animal fats, be in the form of the grass-fed beef or egg yolks, effectively. So it's just something to embrace and not be scared of.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll tell you one of the traps that I fell in here, Will, is the organic mayo. And I didn't do enough research on it, and I have 2 things of organic mayo in my fridge right now. They'll be the first to go.
So,
not that you're suggesting.
yeah, no,
No,
we can touch on Mayo real quick. So
Yeah.
Mayo made with high quality fats is a great way to get some fats. Unfortunately, most mayo, even if it's organic, is made with either soybean oil or canola oil.
Yeah.
And so we're better off. There's a brand called Primal Kitchen Avocado Mayo, and there's a plug for Mark Sisson's product. We're not affiliated with it at all, but they use avocado oil as the oil in the mayo, and it's delicious. They make a chipotle. They make a couple different flavors of it.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's
and I almost let a word slip there. It's that good. It's really, really good.
He already swore.
So
you got to change this to mature audience.
Yeah. I don't know if that was a PG-13 swear word I used, but
whatever, we can swear.
So he was touching on their mayo, right? Avocado oil. We didn't really get into how important it is to be consuming avocados out of all the vegetables. So yes, that's a great way to flavor up your food, and for anyone who really likes that extra condiment, that avocado oil-based mayo is excellent.
Yep.
Yeah. So avocado mayo, and just be careful of the oils that are used to make your other mayos.
Yep.
So, but no, it's awesome to put on everything.
You can make your chicken salad with it, your egg salad with it,
tuna
whatever.
salad, egg salad. Yeah.
Go to town this week and tell us about it.
I need to get back on track. We have a fairly empty fridge due to the week and a half vacation I took. So
all right, stock it up with the good stuff.
That's all I got, guys.
Cool.
Hopefully,
that's all I got too.
Yeah, we're all done. Spent. We need more.
All right.
fat.
All right. Well, that is another episode of Apollo Challenge Live, number 12. We will be back again. We'll be back again next week, same time, same place, for episode 13. Make sure you subscribe to us on YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. There's a little button around here somewhere. Just click that, and you'll get alerted next time we go live and all the other videos we post. Follow us on Instagram. Check out our website for all of the information we provide. We've got tons of articles to answer all your questions. If you do have questions, ask them on Facebook, YouTube, on the comments here if it was about one of the things we discussed, or on our website directly. The book is available on Amazon. Just search Apollo Challenge on Amazon.com. And thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you next week.
See you next week, guys.